In many cases, you perceive more than what exists in reality, and on many occasions, you perceive less. There is an objective reality, you just don't know what it is. Hi, Craig here, and welcome to my channel, The Atheist Experiment. Many of you out there kind of know what science is, but haven't really taken the time to really consider what science is, and how it is used and why it is so important. We don't really think about the essence of science. We just take for granted that roses are red and thunder is loud. Science is about the discovery of how reality works, but it's even more than that. It attempts to investigate the universe by removing our own senses from the process, and it introduces techniques that remove biases. We don't see the world as it is. We are tricked every day into seeing what we need to see. We have no way of knowing that what we perceive is really accurate. First, let's define objective reality, as it is used from a scientific point of view. Something is objectively real if it would continue to exist even if there were no creatures around to experience it. Colors, odors, tastes, feelings, etc. are not real in the sense that they exist outside of our experience. But they are real in the sense that the experience is real to us. If no one in the universe had taste buds, then brains would not experience taste, and therefore the sensation of taste would not exist. It is real to you, the subject, but not objectively real. Think about a red rose. It is only red because your eyes have gone through an evolutionary process to be able to distinguish colors, and we have all agreed that red is red. But if an alien visited our planet and had never evolved the need to see red, then that alien might see the rose as something entirely different than what we see. And think about this. If there were nothing in the universe that could see anything, then would the rose still be red? Our brain makes it red. Red is just a tiny part of the light spectrum, of which we can only see a very small part of it. If you go to a shorter wavelength of light, you get ultraviolet and X-rays, which we cannot see, but they're there. If you go to longer wavelengths of light, we have infrared and radio, which we cannot see, but they are there, all around us. We think we see everything around us, but we don't. We don't even come close to seeing everything around us. And in the same respect, we see a lot of things that are not there. For example, you see some graffiti on a wall or a train, and you immediately have a visceral response. Your heart may increase, your breathing may increase, and your anxiety may go up. You are offended. But if that same graffiti were in a different language, you are likely to be stimulated in a completely different way. Even though your eyes are being saturated with the same arrangement of colors and shapes, you might even think it's beautiful. We all like to believe that our senses are telling the truth, so it can be quite shocking to learn that most of what you perceive is objectively wrong.
Random thought. Let's talk about magic for a minute. It's so easy to have your senses fooled by a magician. And the better they are at fooling you. A good magician will leave you baffled and amazed. There's no such thing as magic, right? Magic or magicians. They're just well-crafted skill in order to put on a show. And that's all it is, a show. A very highly skilled show, but still a show. There's no magic involved. It's a great example of how our senses can be fooled. You may think you saw something or didn't see something, and you may think you heard, but you didn't hear. And a really good magician will play with your senses and fool you into thinking you saw or heard something you didn't. It's a great example of how our mind can insert information that's not really there, or misinformation that was given to you and you didn't pick up on it. A good con man can do the same thing, and a very charismatic speaker can also do this. And you thought you could trust your senses.
And let's not forget, the brain itself is fallible. It can do all sorts of weird things that are unexpected and even disturbing. Dreams, waking dreams, hallucinations, sleep paralysis, deja vu, anxiety, depression, phobias, and so on. Now, we have evolved this way because that is what it takes to survive. The way we perceive things is exactly the way it should be in order to live out our lives without sensory overload. Our brains are always cutting out the information we don't need so that we can focus on what we do need to survive and go about our day-to-day activities. Don't forget, evolution requires that we just be good enough, not perfect. We just need to be good enough to survive long enough to pass on our genetic material. Then evolution says, fuck off now. For example, if you were living in the jungle 10,000 years ago and you heard a rustling in the bushes, it would make sense for you to assume it was something like a lion that wants to eat you. So you run or hide or prepare to defend yourself. Your fear response is heightened. You might be wrong, but in this case, it is better to be wrong and run away than it is to be wrong and take time to think about whether or not the rustling bushes might be the wind or a squirrel or another human. That incorrect assumption would help you to survive, and it continues to be this way to some degree today. You don't analyze every situation because that would be exhausting and crippling. We all see less than is there and more than what is there at the same time. These are just a couple of cognitive biases, and that is what the scientific method tries to remove. Genius scientists and engineers have built equipment that can focus on the task at hand and not be skewed by these biases, which gives the scientist a controlled environment in which to conduct their experiment. There are many types of scientific methods, some better than some worse. There are many steps to the scientific methods, but making equipment like telescopes and microscopes were monumental in removing the sensory prejudices we all experience. It may not be possible to eliminate all biases, but the more we mitigate the risk of introducing these preconceptions, the closer we get to seeing the objective universe. Science does not make any claims about any objective truths. Scientists present the best known models of the universe and constantly update them as more information is discovered. It's funny because people who say that they don't trust science because it is always changing are fundamentally missing the point of science. It is intended to change. It isn't static. Science doesn't make a proclamation of truth and then says, oh, we're done. The essence of science is that it is always changing and updating and even admitting that it is sometimes completely wrong. But being wrong from time to time is exactly what brings us closer to understanding our world. And just for the record, science is not wrong as often as you might think. It is just building on what was known before and adding to it or subtracting from it. Even if science is just presenting its best model at the time, those models achieve results. What are you watching this on right now? Have you ever driven a car? Have you ever seen a rocket launch into space? Have you ever used GPS to figure out how to get somewhere? Have you ever flipped a light switch? How many of you really know how the light comes on when you flip the switch? Have you ever thought about it? Turning on a light is not a fully understood science, but we have enough scientific knowledge about electromagnetism to get it to work. The model is sound. Science produces antibiotics. It produces vaccines that work. The modern scientific method has been proven time and time again to be effective. So where am I going with this? There are a lot of claims out there regarding the supernatural, and none of them point to an objective reality. They are all subjective. They are all based on subjective experiences. None of them can be investigated by any scientific method. So before I go any further, let me define how I'm using the word supernatural. There is an extensive definition of super, but the way I'm using it here is above or beyond. And by nature, I mean everything that objectively exists in the universe. So you could say that supernatural is above or beyond everything that objectively exists in the universe. Now, I recognize that there is still a problem with my definition because some might say that ghosts exist in the universe, to which I would say, if you can demonstrate that ghosts exist in the objective reality, then it is not supernatural. It can now be defined as natural. So no matter how you try to define what supernatural is, it will be problematic. But in the colloquial sense, I am referring to things like ghosts, spirits, gods, psychics, fairies, vampires, prophets, angels, voodoo, miracles, etc. I am not referring to things like aliens, even though those claims are equally as subjective. At least aliens would exist in the natural world, which would make them much more plausible. So, claims of the supernatural, and I say claims because as far as I know right now, we cannot investigate objectively many, or even, as bold as it may sound, all supernatural claims. Then there is the question, how would you even begin to figure out a way to demonstrate the supernatural? Anyway, I hope you get what I mean, and I can go on. Why can't a subjective claim be used as compelling evidence? Well, let's circle back to what I mentioned earlier about what we think we perceive, and what we don't perceive, and the extra things we perceive that are not there or not real. The brain is a mysterious thing, but many of us talk about it as if we have it all figured out. Brain science is really in its infancy, and although we have learned a tremendous amount about it, we still know very little. But even if you are convinced you have had a supernatural experience, and I don't doubt you had the experience is real for you. But how do you attribute that experience to a supernatural occurrence? To be honest with yourself, you have to say that you don't know what it was. And that's it. End it right there. You don't know. End of story. You don't get to insert an arbitrary explanation for something that happened that you can't explain. That is where the science ends. That is where the demonstration of the evidence ends. The only thing you must go on is your own subjective experience, which can be wrong in a multitude of different ways. There could be part of the picture you're not seeing. You could be seeing something that isn't there. Your brain could be malfunctioning, and even if you investigate all of the ways you could be wrong and you determine that your perception was in fact accurate and true, you still end up forced to take the position that you just don't know what the hell it was. You don't get to assume what you think it was in order for it to fit your narrative. And if you say that that doesn't make sense to you, Well, I'm sorry, but that's too bad. The universe is not obligated to make sense to us. The truths of the universe do not always make sense. They are not necessarily intuitive. People may say, "How can you be so comfortable with saying, I don't know?" Well, I say I'm not comfortable with it, and that is why we have science to try and figure this shit out. But I do have to accept that there are existential things I do not have answers to.
Random thought! Do you know why saying I don't know is so important? It's because it encourages investigating further when you say I don't know. Because if you say you do know and you've got all the answers to all your problems, then what would encourage you to continue looking, to continue investigating, to continue trying to find out if you might be wrong? If you admit to yourself that you don't know the answer to something, then maybe you'll go out and you'll try to find the answer. But if you think you already have the answers, then curiosity is dead. Why bother looking? You've got it all figured out, right?
So let's examine a common supernatural example: near-death experience. This is a widely used argument for the existence of an afterlife. First, I want to break down the phrase near-death experience. Near death. It's not after death, it's not absolute death, it's near death, meaning you are near to it, not actually dead. You may have appeared dead or even been pronounced dead, but that just shows that we really don't know when death occurs. Dying is a process. Death is permanent. It happens a lot. We call someone dead and then they are resuscitated or even come back spontaneously. But they must not have actually been dead. Maybe in a clinical sense, but we are sometimes wrong. So when someone is dead, I mean really dead, we are not ever going to know what kind of experience they're having, or even if they're having an experience at all. When someone is really dead, they're dead. No one in history of the world has cheated death. All things die. So remember, it's a near-death experience, not an actual death experience. Now the word experience, it's an experience, meaning it's subjective, meaning that only that person can tell about their own experience. It can't be investigated, it can't be repeated in a scientific way, and it can't predict anything. No one else can corroborate your story. It's not compelling evidence for anything supernatural. Now, some experiments have been attempted, but with no definitive results. Doctors have tried putting an item on top of a high shelf, like a magazine, in the hopes that a dying person who claims to float around the room would see the magazine and report back. But no such luck so far. So the brain is doing weird, unexplained stuff all the time. We dream, we hallucinate, we have all these cognitive biases and malfunctions all the time. What makes us think that a dying brain is any different? And so now it has to be a supernatural thing, an afterlife? We can demonstrate all these odd brain functions and behaviors. No one has ever been able to demonstrate the existence of an afterlife. Our brain can be tricked by our own brain. That is a demonstrable fact. Any claim of supernatural experience is by all means a real existence. No one is taking that away from you. I am not discounting your experience. But the claims of the supernatural based on these experiences, well, that remains to be proven. So our brain is constantly feeding us very poor information, at best, and completely wrong information at worst. We perceive more than what exists, and at times we perceive less than what exists. Our brains are fallible, and we have to accept that we often get things wrong. And our experiences are often just that, nothing more than experiences, subject to your own interpretation. It takes a rational mind to weed through these misconceptions about reality, but anyone can do it with some practice. I did not live most of my life by rational thought, and once I discovered it, I found that I couldn't get enough of it, and I learn a little more about rational thought processes every day as I try to mitigate and understand my experiences without jumping to conclusions that just give me a false sense of comfort. And the irony is, it actually makes me feel better to know the truth and not just my version of the truth. Don't trust your eyes. Ask yourself, did I really see what I think I saw? And if I think I did, can I prove it to anyone else in a convincing way that will make them believe me beyond a shadow of a doubt? Thank you for listening, and hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.
Hey there, my friends. If you enjoy my videos and you would like to see more, subscribe. And don't forget to scroll down and hit the little bell so you can get notifications. I will be putting out a video every Sunday evening, and if you like it, hit the like button. And if you don't like it, hit the dislike button. Also, leave a comment and let me know what you think. Catch you next time, and have a great week.